Welcome to the Brevard News Focus. I'm Kevin Jeffrey, your moderator. No matter the opinion you have of January 6th, most people would agree that it's probably the most controversial protest in U.S. history. On that day, we're told that an insurrection occurred, but there's a lot of questions that are arising. President Trump refuted a lot of that. There's a new congressional investigation that's going to take place. There are a lot of questions that are still yet to be answered. There are missing tapes of protests that occurred on that day. There are tapes where you see some protesters peacefully walking through the Capitol, and there's questions about that. There's a lot of controversy surrounding January 6th. So President Trump did do what he said that he was going to do on the first day of office, and he pardoned over 1,500 protesters that were involved in the January 6th protests. Joining us today is one of those people who received a pardon, and it's Cal Fitzsimons. Cal, welcome to Brevard News.
Hi, Mr. Jeffrey. Thank you for having me on your program today.
Thank you for being here. You know what's ironic is that this time last week, you were in a totally different location. So what were you doing? Just walk us through what you were doing this time last week.
About this time last week, I was getting ready for lights out and count time. The Federal Bureau of Prisons has a stand-up count every day, twice, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, and after the final count in the evening, it's lights out. See you in the morning.
So what prison is this?
This was at the the BOP facility in Coleman, Florida, the Coleman Low Security Compound.
So how does it feel to be home right now? I mean, when you reached here to your mother's home, which is in Titusville, she lives in Titusville, what was it like?
I'm still in disbelief. I honestly did not expect things to go as they went, and I'm ecstatic and very thankful and grateful to President Trump for his proclamation.
So when did you get home?
I got home on Tuesday afternoon. There had been some inkling that something might be done. Starting all throughout the campaign, Trump had talked about the January 6 prisoners. And when he was elected, there was some great hope that something might be done along the lines that he had promised. And promises made, promises kept today. God bless him.
So when did you find out that there was a possibility that it was going to happen on the first day, on the inauguration day?
We were still on pins and needles. We had no idea. And that's something about prison, is that typically when someone has an out date or a scheduled release, there is some anxiety as you get close to the door. So you can imagine, in our cases, hearing the rumor, the speculation, are we going, are we not? Will some only be pardoned? Will some have to remain? Will some only be commuted? It was really stressful, and I tried to stay busy and pretty much ignore it until it was a sure thing. And it became very apparent as soon as Trump was sworn in that it was happening.
So what was that like? Walk me through. So he says that he's going to do this. He sits down and he signs the order, the executive order. What was it like when that happened and you found out?
Well, the wonderful thing about the Coleman Low complex is that there's there's activities for men to engage in to better pass their time. I was very involved in the hobby craft for leather. So I was making bags, wallets, staying active in the most productive fashion. And I was in the Lobbycraft hobby shop when we were listening to the radio, Trump making his speeches, and near simultaneously with him saying those things out of his mouth, a guard presented himself and told me I was wanted at the lieutenant's office. So that was an emotional moment because that, to me, meant word had come down from on high that it was really going to be time to go.
So what were you thinking when he summoned you?
I basically gave everything I could away because I wasn't going to need it any longer, and there are men in prison who will be there for decades yet. And it's always the tradition when you leave a place or you're going home to please share what you have with those who remain. I grabbed my projects that I've been working on, so it was actually a comical sight when I rolled up to the lieutenant's office with a backpack, 2 duffel bags, a messenger bag, all ready to go. That got some looks. That turned some heads.
So you were pretty sure this was going down.
No, but I had made projects for myself that could be useful to me in the event that I did go home.
So you had been in several prisons, and you started off at the Washington, D.C. jail, correct?
I did the majority of my time inside in the D.C. jail. I did 2.5 years there.
So there were J6 prisoners all over. Florida had a lot of them, the majority from what I understand. But the Washington, D.C. jail, it received a lot of flack because of the conditions of the jail. And so there is the belief that they were keeping people in solitary confinement. They were doing things and not allowing the prisoners to have certain freedoms. Were some of those things accurate, or were they overplayed?
Oh no, they were absolutely accurate, and it's well-deserved flack. The thing about the D.C. jail is that it has notoriously been a horribly run prison, and that was even before we basically forced some light onto the issue. And one thing that I thought was remarkable is how much things improved once Congress decided to exercise its oversight. We had visits from Marjorie Taylor Greene, Louis Gohmert showed up, Troy Nels, Byron Donalds. So these are the folks that came to visit us in the D.C. jail, and I can say we went from being locked down 23 hours a day with no recreation, no religious services, no barbershop, subpar food, no visitation. We went from that to getting recreation outdoors where we could get fresh air and some sun. We had citrus. That was a big deal, just having a fresh fruit. And we got to get our hair cut and look presentable for when we had to appear before the judges.
So before then, it was different?
In the end, it was different. And I think that I can tell you that the staff and the other prisoners had taken notice of the changes, and there was approval. There was a definite mood enhancement at that prison because of the reforms that had been introduced from our stay there.
So the congressmen, when they came in, did they actually see the true conditions, or did they clean it up before they came in?
Yes, the congressman absolutely saw it, and so did the marshals. The marshals came in and actually saw the conditions and arranged the transport of several prisoners that were in federal custody to other prisons in the area. There was like an airlift overnight to get the men out of there. Because
of the condition of the prisons, or the prisoners, or the prison?
Because of the conditions of the prison.
And why did they do that? It was overcrowded, or?
Each jail has got an agreement with marshals that are housing federal inmates or federal detainees that are pretrial or doing any sort of incarceration relating to federal charges. And they have certain standards that must be maintained. Those standards were left by the wayside, and the marshals reacted. They reacted strongly and with sanctions.
So what led you to Washington, D.C. on January 6th? Now, you actually weren't from Florida, you were from Maine. And so January 6th, walk us through what happened that led you to go to Washington, D.C., and walk us through that day that you actually went.
So I was very involved, if not vocal, on the local scene in Maine. I had testified at hearings for laws. I had sat on a committee in my town for the ordinance when marijuana legalization rolled through Maine. I had also been an opponent of some proposed referendums in the town as well. And the thing about Maine is that it's an older state. Something I'm sure that Florida understands is that there are some older folks that are your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And it was important to me when January 6th became an issue that those that wanted to go, would have liked to go, had someone that did go. And it brought me to Washington, D.C. on January 6th.
So what did you think was going to happen that day? Were you going up, and there's a lot of people who say, oh, they went up with the idea that there's going to be an insurrection, they were going to overthrow the government. Was that your thinking?
Well, for one, January 6th was an invitation by Donald Trump to attend a rally. He did have a rally at the Ellipse, and if you remember back in 2020, 2021, there were marches leading up to January 6th, the Stop the Steal marches. I had seen videos of those where there were clashes of groups on the streets of DC and how it was becoming increasingly violent just to visit the city. And I was under no illusion that there might be some sort of trouble, but honestly, I wasn't heading down there to cause it. When we...
Were you armed?
No, I was not armed. I was not armed. And I say that when I looked around at the Ellipse, yes, there were people wearing full tactical outfits. I wasn't wearing any of that. I didn't bring that. The thing that was different about the Ellipse rally, though, was that in the lead up it had been Stop the Steal.
So when you say the Ellipse, so tell our viewers, what does that mean? So the Ellipse is a place in D.C. where President Trump was having a rally that was down the street from the Capitol. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
The Ellipse is basically the grounds of the Washington Monument, which sits adjacent to the White House.
Okay.
The president was delivering his remarks at a park there, and I had to go through a metal detector to attend. I I stayed for the entirety of the speech, and what I was getting to, what I want to say is that in those weeks leading up to the 6th, it had been Stop the Steal marches, Stop the Steal rallies. The banner over the stage that day wasn't Stop the Steal, it was Save America. Hmm. And at the 6th, I saw people from Cuba, Vietnam, Chinese, all begging anyone who would listen to them to wake up and smell the coffee, that this was not right and this was the last chance to protest and make your voices heard. And that was something that has always stayed with me, is that idea that it could have been the last day.
So was it a peaceful, that part was peaceful, there were no fightings or anything of that nature going on at the Eclipse?
No, at the Ellipse it was actually a joyful atmosphere. Folks were in that jovial rally mentality, that vibe that Trump rallies are known for. We heard speakers like Rudy Giuliani, Trump Jr. spoke, John Eastman, and John Eastman delivered again that legal theory about how the election was still salvageable, and everybody was feeling good about Mike Pence and the objections that would be raised to the election, and that there was still a path to victory.
So Trump ends his speech, and he says what at the end of the speech?
Now, this is something that they love to harp on.
Well, I mean, this is a big controversy, right?
That's right.
What did he say at the end of the speech?
We're going to march down to the Capitol. And I verbatim escapes me, but I never took that as a directive to cause trouble.
Did you see that other people there take that as a directive?
Well, Mr. Jeffrey, I got to say is that by the time I got to the Capitol, the trouble had already started, and the trouble started before Trump was even done speaking at his rally.
Now, why do you say that?
Timing, and when barricades were removed by groups in and around the Capitol.
So as you start walking, how far from the Capitol was this?
It's at opposite sides of the National Mall. So to walk from the Ellipse to the Capitol, it's a good ways. It's many football fields.
So by the time you reached the Capitol, what did you see?
Well, I'll back up just 1 second. I did not go straight from the Ellipse to the Capitol.
Okay.
YMCA is a rally song, and
So you were doing the YMCA sound?
no, but the Village
No.
People were dressed up. The Village People is just a group that dresses up all sorts of walks of life, and people were in costume, and some of those costumes reflected their trades.
Okay.
There were people in hard hats. There were people wearing their tool belts, and at the time I was a butcher, and I decided to go back to my car and get dressed up in my gear, which, in hindsight, is maybe rather foolish.
That was very violent of you. I mean, you probably had some knife-looking things, right?
No knives, but I'll not deny that I had brought with me a bow, which I unstrung. It's a Native American tradition to show up to a meeting with an unstrung bow to show that you're not violent or not holding a weapon, but it's held in reserve.
So you went back to the car and you changed your dress. Then you headed toward the Capitol.
That's right. And by the time I could see the Capitol, there was already a 50-foot American flag draped over the scaffolding, and people were already up the steps of the Capitol. There were no barricades to speak of. So walking,
Did that surprise you?
it did, but we'd also been told that we were going to march up there and that there would be more speakers for the day that were going to speak on the grounds. And I do believe that there were permits pulled for the grounds that day for the rally to continue in the footprint of the Capitol.
So when did the alarm start going off in your mind that something is not right?
I'd have to say the alarm started going off once I passed a woman who had been injured by a rubber bullet. And at that point, the press of people in the crowd was pushing one way. There was many hundreds of thousands of people. I think that's one of the biggest disservice the media has paid to the 6th in saying that it was sparsely attended. The video footage from my trial can even lay that myth aside. It was a big event.
This is wall-to-wall people?
A tidal wave of people. There was so many people. People of all color stripes, people of all walks of life, colors, creeds. It was absolutely well-attended event.
So where did the rubber bullets come from? So you run into a woman and she's down and that was because of a rubber bullet. How did you know that, and then where did you find that the rubber bullet came from?
I never found where it may have came from, but you can imagine that that's a crowd control device and that it didn't come from the crowd. My understanding, and in review of videos during discovery process of my trial, I did find that what appeared to happen was that there was a complete loss of control of the police cordon. And when that happened, the Capitol Police panicked, called in reinforcements from DC Metro, and when the DC Metro Police arrived, they immediately began using batons, tear gas, pepper spray, and rubber bullets to basically brutalize the crowd into submission, which only exacerbated the issue and heightened the tensions.
So now this was on which side of the Capitol?
Now this is on the west side of the Capitol. The west side experienced the ugliest rioting that day, and sadly that is where where you would have wound up walking from the ellipse.
So you walk to the Capitol, you see this going on. How did you get into the fray, and how did you get charged?
I got into the fray because I think many men, when they see violence being perpetrated against women, elderly, that they feel they need to do something about it.
Perpetrated by whom?
Now, that's the thing. It was perpetrated by the police that day.
On elderly women?
That's right.
So it was indiscriminate as to whom they were attacking.
Well, that's the thing. Tear gas and pepper spray are indiscriminate crowd control devices.
And so when you saw this, you responded in what way?
I wanted to put myself at the front, and I did get there.
Then what happened?
I saw more things that were of an alarming nature.
Such as?
One thing that the government never would agree I could see happening was the beating of Victoria White, which happened right in front of me at the West Tunnel.
Now, Victoria White is the lady that she was drugged into a tunnel. And it looked like from film that there were several police officers that were constantly beating her with batons.
Over the head strikes.
Right.
To her head.
And you saw this yourself?
You could see it, and the crowd knew that there was some very heinous acts happening in that tunnel.
And so what happened from that point?
Well, the next 4 minutes of my life were fairly transformative. I reacted. And I can't say that that reaction served me well in life, but I can't say that I would have reacted differently today. It's something that when you see something so visceral happen in front of you, you need to react.
So there's a lot of questions, and a lot of the media in particular are questioning President Trump's pardon of the J6ers because their premise is that a lot of these people that he pardoned violently attacked police officers. Did you see that happening that day, and were you a part of it?
I was convicted of assault on police officers, Mr. Jeffrey. And I know that in my case, I ended that day in the hospital with stitches in my scalp. And it was an ugly scene, and I feel that the crowd was provoked into their actions by the police response. And I don't blame the police for that. I feel like they were left high and dry. I know that President Trump had offered the National Guard to set up a cordon around that building, and that it was declined by Nancy Pelosi and Muriel Bowser. I feel that the police were set up as well, and that this was allowed to happen to derail the certification of the election. One that many, to this day, and thankfully President Trump has never backed down from, feel was a fraudulent and stolen election.
So what were people doing during that time? Did they believe this was a setup? Were people confused? What was happening?
I think that supposes that there was rationality winning over anyone's mind at that time.
So it was just chaos?
Absolutely, it was chaos. Absolutely, it was chaos. And I could tell when I was walking off the steps that there was a certain amount of disgust, even from the crowd, at what was going on.
Now, you said that you suffered head injuries and you were taken to the hospital. How did that happen? Did you know that you were being were you unconscious? Walk me through how that happened.
I walked off the steps of the Capitol and was immediately grabbed for triage by some Good Samaritans. Uh, they began walking me back.
Were you bloodied?
I was very bloody. That's the thing about scalp wounds, is that they are heavy bleeders. I didn't make it back to, I didn't make it past the mall. A local fire, DC Fire Department ambulance actually picked me up, and I was taken to a local hospital where I was treated.
Were you aware of what was going on?
I was, but I can't say that the adrenaline had let go of its grip, or that I had any good idea of what had just happened.
So when did you come to the conclusion, come to an awareness of what had happened? Did it take you a while to process all that you saw and all that happened that day before you were able to wrap your mind around it?
I think it began to crystallize for me as early as the evening when the vote was held to force through the election results. And then certainly by the next day, when the media had begun castigating and really demonizing anyone who partook in the protest that day.
Were you shocked at that?
I was not necessarily shocked, but I still thought that there'd be an opportunity to get the truth out about what had happened, about what had transpired, and not this narrative that there was an insurrection. That word has never sat right with me.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of this segment, and we're going to continue into our next segment, and we want to find out about the arrest of Kyle Fitzsimons, let me get that right, and his prosecution, and we'll do it in the next segment.